Hello again, friends. Welcome to another In Other News. Land of the Lost edition. No, not really. This one is yet another in a long-standing now series of news that actually isn't in other news because it's been front page center news for some time now. And I typically don't do podcast on stuff while it's still very active, very hot, and ongoing. But so many folks have been hitting me up about what's going on in Turkey that I felt compelled, nay, forced to at least chat about it a little bit. And so that's what we're going to do. And I also suddenly saw this storm rolling in. I'm like, wow, what a great background. Here it is, June 13th. You're in Blacksburg, Virginia, and it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Wicked storm rolling in. Looks like it's nighttime outside already. And wicked storm here in Blacksburg. Hey, that's kind of an analogy to the wicked storm that's going on in Turkey, to which we'll now turn. I'm not going to go through all the excruciating details, but for a lot of folks who follow my podcast, because most of you took my classes, you know that for years, gosh, for a decade, I've been talking about how awesome Turkey is, how they're a rising regional power, how they've done exceptionally well in the exact last decade under the leadership of one Recep Erdogan, the current prime minister. Been prime minister for a decade, has got another 2, 3, 4, 5 years of being a prime minister. He has already kind of announced intentions that he would like to run for president after this next run of being prime minister. And again, I don't know the exact dates on this, but he is the center of all this fury now. So I think that's why so many students have been hitting me up, because they're like, hey, Boyer, you said everybody loved this guy. He's a wildly, radically popular prime minister of Turkey in an era of positive growth for Turkey. Not just economic growth, but cultural growth and foreign policy outreach, and Turkey as a leader within the Middle East, and Turkey as a leader within the greater regions all around it. And I stand by that. They are, and they've done exceptionally well under the last decade of Recep Erdogan's leadership, as the prime minister. So what's all this fuss about? What's going on? Is it the end of days for Erdogan and for Turkey, period? No. And again, hey, I'm just an analyst like so many others. All I can tell you is all the stuff I've read, all the stuff I know, and try to put it together into some sort of coherent analysis. And I'm going to stand by the guy and say, no, I do not believe these current protests you're seeing explosive scenes of from mostly Istanbul, but across different parts of Turkey. I don't think it's going to result in the departure of Prime Minister Erdogan. He is still kind of widely supported. His AK Justice Party is the majority. They're a democracy. Yes, it's a prime minister parliamentary democracy, but it's a democracy. And so this is the rub. This is why this is a very strange situation, albeit not completely unpredictable. But I'm going to make some analogies to American politics that may help you understand it more. So maybe I should back up for a second and just kind of allude to what's happening here for those that have no clue. About a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks now, I can't even remember, whatever the timeline is, there's been these protests, environmentally based protests, to protect this group of sycamore trees in a kind of a local park there in the capital that has been planned to be bulldozed to build a shopping center or business center, whatever you want to call it. Fair enough. The protests have been those protests were peaceful. People were just hanging out. Nobody really paid much attention. And anybody who tells you that this current uprising and could blow up in street protest in Turkey, that it's still about environmental stuff and a bunch of trees, no, it's not at all. That's how it started, though. The problem is that Erdogan, Prime Minister Erdogan, and they're conservative, they're center-right conservative, religiously conservative, economically, fiscally conservative, but they're really pro-business, pro-growth. It's one of the reasons why Turkey's been doing so well for 10 years. And so that type of leadership, they said, hey, we don't care that much about a bunch of sycamore trees. We don't really care about a few dozen protesters who were trying to save them. We're going to bulldoze this place to make room for business, economy, yes, fiscal growth, yeah. That's their priority. And again, they've been doing pretty well at that for a decade. However, the fatal flaw here was that Erdogan, maybe personally, but certainly the local police, decided to deal with it a little more harshly than they should have. So they ran in there with tear gas and water cannons and tried to push all these people out. Again, this was not a national issue before the police went in, strong-armed these protesters out. It simply wasn't. No one in Turkey knew about this. But as soon as this happened, then people started taking pictures, taking videos of people, of civilians getting beat up by the local police and tear gas canisters, and then it hit the social networks, and then everybody in Turkey knew about it. And this is what the protests are really all about. Environmentalists aside, I like to save trees too, but that's not what this is about. What we're seeing here in Turkey is a physical manifestation of rage, of powerlessness by a sizable minority. Sizable. And these folks feel powerless because they can't seem to win the prime minister position, because the rest of the country that's not in the AK party, through democratic processes, has taken over the parliament and therefore gets to pick the prime minister. Perfectly, democratically, legally, justifiably legit government. But this other group of folks, which may be 45 or 50% of the population, doesn't like that AK party and doesn't like Recep Erdogan. And so they have been feeling, I won't say castrated, but kind of powerless. It's like they can't, the other political parties haven't been able to rally, haven't been able to get enough representation in the parliament to make a difference, and certainly haven't been able to rally enough popular support to have any hope of taking over the parliament and therefore ejecting Recep Erdogan. So what you have here is a polarized society now that has kind of been subtly polarized, and now it's openly polarized. And what I mean by that is it's left versus right. I hate to simplify things. It's so shallow and simplistic to do it. But here's the analogy I promised earlier that will maybe make more sense to Americans. It's very much like the Democrats and Republicans. And it's very much like, not even right this second, I don't think, in American politics, but I like to point to the second election, the second term of the Bush administration. I'm not making fun of the Bush administration. I'm not making fun of Republicans. But here's the analogy. And you know this if you're an American or lived in America in the last 10 years. When the first Bush administration came in, 9/11, and then this over-response, I think, to invade Afghanistan, then to roll over and invade Iraq, and to do all these things, and the other party, the Democrats, and of course George Bush is a Republican, and the Republican Party legitimately and legally won the presidential election, so he's in charge. No one's disputing that. But the United States as a country is pretty almost exactly divided, like 50% Democrats and 50% Republicans, plus or minus 1 or 2%, and that's how every election's been for like 20 years now, is you only win by 1% or 2% in national elections. So there's always a sizable minority that's unhappy with the person in power. Again, back to the analogy. It wasn't so much the first Bush term, but the second Bush term. I remember Democrats were beside themselves. Democrats were enraged, like, oh my God, this is the worst administration ever. How could we possibly be getting to vote this guy back into office? And then, of course, he did get voted back into office. And I remember liberals being livid, beside themselves, enraged. People saying, I'm leaving the country. I'm moving out of here. The Republicans are so bad. George Bush is so bad. I can't stand it. That is the analogy. And so what you had in America for that second Bush term is a sizable minority, all the Democrats, all the liberals, who were like, oh my gosh, this guy's the worst president ever. We're losing our rights. We're losing privacy laws. We're losing all this nefarious stuff that's going on in the government under the Bush-Cheney administration. Now, whether that's true or not, I'm not disputing that here. But the perception was there by folks on the left side of the column. And they were just enraged and they felt powerless and angry, and helped polarize the country even more. And I think this is what led to the reversal and got Barack Obama elected. As people said, no, enough of that group, enough of that side's opinion in the presidential seat. we're going to vote the other side in now. I think the analogy is pretty close for Turkey. You have a fairly divided society where maybe it's 55% support Erdogan. And he's, again, conservative right, much like the Republicans in America. Conservative right guy, conservative right party, and they may actually have like 55 or 60% public support. But you still have 40 or 45% of folks on the other side that don't like him, that don't like his policies, that don't like the direction Turkey's going in. And that, my friends, is what you're seeing on the streets of Ankara and Istanbul and all the places right now. That's the rage. It's a 10-year built-up feeling of frustration and powerlessness that their party can't, their parties, it's not a single one, can't seem to get back in there and get more power in the government to fight back against a lot of policies that the liberal left folks in Turkey do not like. You'll often also hear the word secular. The liberal left secular minority in Turkey feels like they're under attack. Why would they feel that? Why would they feel like they're under attack when Turkey has been doing well for 10 years? You can like Erdogan, you can hate Erdogan, but you can't dispute that Turkey has been doing very well for a decade. The secularist, liberal, leftist, whatever political party they're affiliated with, and it's mostly an urban too. There's a real urban-rural split in Turkey. Gosh, much like in America. Think about the red and blue states. Every national election. Which states are red, which states are blue. Oh, the urban area populous ones are blue, and all the sticks in the middle, the rural areas are red. You got the same thing going on in Turkey. So it's the urbanized, educated, sometimes elitist, but certainly the secularist liberal folks who say, no, we want more liberal human rights, and we should have the right to drink alcohol if we want, which is an issue, by the way. We want to keep Turkey as a secular state. We don't want Islam bleeding into the fabric of the political system. And that's really what a lot of the debate and frustration is about. The liberal left secular side, which, by the way, Turkey has built its modern state on being secular. Built it on being secular. And so they say, hey, it's several times in Turkey's history, the military has actually intervened and fired the entire government because they thought it was getting a little too Islamic. It was starting to lose its secularness, that Islam, or just say religion, was bleeding into politics a little too much. And that was part of Turkey's constitution in the modern era. They say, no, we're a secular state, and the military will protect that at all costs. And so that tradition has kind of gone down through the generations of Turks, particularly in the modern era, particularly educated, urbanized folks are like, yes, no, we're a secular state. We're a secular state like Europe. We're not a theocracy like Iran. And so the real frustration and rage you're seeing now is a lot of folks are seeing that wall between church and state apparently being eroded a little bit. And for full disclaimer, you guys know me. I like Erdogan. I think he's a very strong, passionate, devout Muslim, good leader who's done well for his country. He's taking a hit right now, and I'm putting up full disclosure that I like the guy because now I can say, to counterbalance that, he has screwed up some. He has done some things which I think do frustrate the left, and if I was living in Turkey, I would be worried about them too. Things like banning the sale of alcohol during the day. Erdogan is starting to take kind of this nanny state approach where he's like, well, it's got nothing to do with Islam. We just want a better culture, so no, you can't buy alcohol during the day. And then Erdogan's a very strong character, so he takes it a little too far sometimes. And when questioned about this, they're like, dude, but yes, we're an Islamic society, but people should have the right to alcohol. And Erdogan said something to the effect of, well, if you really need alcohol during the day, you're an alcoholic, so you really don't deserve it. It's like, what? Okay, that's a little extreme, but we're willing to forgive that. Erdogan and his center-right, conservative, devout Islamic party also got a lot of the laws struck out that used to ban the wearing of the burqa or headdress or religious symbols in public offices or institutions. That was a stalwart, a foundation stone of the secular state for decades and decades and decades, and they said, and again, I understand, they're like, well, come on, that's kind of outdated. If a woman wants to wear a headdress in parliament, she should be allowed to. And again, I agree with that. But then the secular liberal left says, it's eroding the division between Islam and state. See, that religious party is trying to blend it in too much. And then to kind of finally to bring it back to the current event, Erdogan is a very, I won't say arrogant, he's a very confident leader. That's one of the reasons I like him. Like him, hate him, whatever. But he's a confident man who says, this is what I think. I have the popular vote. I have the mandate from the people to lead this way, and I'm going to. He's taken that a little too far, particularly with these particular protests, in that he has called them all hippies or terrorists. And I hate when I hear this. Erdogan, who I do respect, pulled out kind of a total BS line here lately, and he's like, oh, all these protesters, they're all just being whipped up by foreign powers. That is the worst thing. I lost a little bit of respect for Erdogan when he said that, because that's classic nonsense that dictators say. Oh, there's any protest in my country, anyone doesn't like me, oh, it's some foreign devils must be behind that. And I'm like, don't go there, Erdogan. So he is a confident, strong-willed, strong-armed, at this particular juncture, leader who has said, no, this is over. We've debated this. I don't care. Push them out by force now. And this is infuriating people worse. He's making a classic strong leader mistake of attempting to quash any sort of local protest by force. And it just never works. It never, ever works. The protesters are also upset. And I should say again, not just the protesters, not just the people on site, but this has become a vent for frustrations of people across Turkey who say that Erdogan and his party, but Erdogan particularly, is becoming a little bit too much of a nanny state leader, is becoming a little bit too much of a dictator. I think that's a bit extreme. But he is using his power to do what he wants and to pull more power to his position. There's no doubt about that. And in particular, I think Erdogan does need to take note of that a lot of protesters are saying, hey, we don't even have free press here anymore. The press is so intimidated by Erdogan and his political party that they don't publish anything negative about them, or people get fired. Turkey does have the most journalists in jail of any country on planet Earth. That's not good. That never reflects well on a good democracy. So in this particular deal going down in Turkey, this sizable minority is exceptionally unhappy about a variety of things that they are now pinning on Erdogan, a strong-willed, strong individual who has been very successful as leading his country thus far, but perhaps a little too harshly, and that's what he's taking heat for right this second. Does that make sense? That's what all the blow-up's about. It's got nothing to do with trees. No one cares about the trees anymore. They're long since gone. And to finish where I started up, do I think that Erdogan's going to lose power? No. He actually does have a majority. There are a lot of center-right conservative Islamic folks. Well, actually, everyone in Turkey is Islamic, but there's center-right conservative Islamic folks do constitute perhaps 50 or 60% of the population. Many of it in rural areas, but some in cities too. So he's not going anywhere. His political party's not going to lose anytime soon, unless, of course, he takes things even further and becomes even more strong-armed and pulls even more power to himself and deals with protesters even more harshly. You may see him fall from grace, not because his political party will lose, but because his political party will take him out from the inside. That he will start to be seen as a detriment, not an asset. That he'll be seen as a negative on the party and not a positive. So that's possible, but I think even that's kind of remote. I think the end game is sometime soon. I'm hoping, for Erdogan's sake, that he kind of ponies up and says, yeah, okay, let's pull back a little bit. Let's have some sort of vent for the minority who are unhappy here and give them a voice and try to let them blow off some steam and maybe pull back on our conservative moves towards making the state not an Islamic state, but not as secular as it used to be. And that's what those folks are, I think, mostly worried about. But again, lots of parallels between the United States and Turkey here. A divided, polarized society between right and left. And again, being a geographer, between the rural and the urban, That's a big part of this too. And right now, the rural conservative voice has the majority. And therefore, in a democracy, they get to pick who's in charge. And for now, that will continue to be Recep Erdogan, unless things get way worse, which I'm hoping not. Turkey's doing well. It's a great country. He's a good dude. Just needs to lighten up a little bit. But that's all we got for now. Did this answer any questions, or do you have any more? Hit me up right here. I'm not in the land of the lost. I'm right here where I always am. And let's chat about this Turkish situation even more. Hey, folks from Turkey, tell me what I got right and what I got wrong as well. Party on.